One. Hello, everyone. This is Brandon Washington coming to you once again with Agree to Disagree Coast to Coast, the interview series. This is the series where I bring interesting, amazing, smart, intelligent, wonderful people that I have met throughout my life or who have influenced me or have shared something personal that I want to share personally with you. Of course, I'm Brandon Washington, and I want to bring you a series and a show where we get to document regular people's lives. People you may not see on a movie screen or in front of a camera, but have done some amazing things or have helped other people, or even just have amazing things that they want to share with you. Now, this first person for this inaugural interview session is a wonderful gentleman that I know personally that has amazing things that he has here that he wants to share with you. His name is Matt Pike, and I'm going to let him introduce himself, tell you a little bit about himself, and then we're going to dig a little bit deeper into some of those things that are important to him. We're going to talk about those things that have happened throughout his life and maybe even get a little bit of tips or tricks or some of those common things that he thinks could help your life. Now, folks, remember, whether you're watching Agree to Disagree, our entertainment show, or you're watching the interview show that we're showing right now, we want to hear from you. We want to hear about your stories and the things that have touched you or your life, or things that you think could help other people. And of course, this isn't just for us to talk at you and tell you what you need to do with your life. We want to know what you think we can do to help our lives and things that we can implement that you do in your life that could be beneficial to me or my guests or any of the people who are watching this live or being recorded or on YouTube or any of the other internets. Okay? Folks, we appreciate having you here. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to Matt Pike. He is going to tell us just a little bit about you himself. And of course, we appreciate having him here with us. Matt, take it away.
Hello, interwebs. My name is Mathew Pike. I appreciate the opportunity from Mr. Washington. I am out here on the East Coast, Eastern Standard Time, in the great Niagara Falls, New York. I am, I guess you could say, a man of many different levels. I am a business professional. I am a father. I am a multi-instrumentalist musician. I also get paid for many different services I provide, which are all legal. I also do enjoy sports from time to time, but I definitely don't have that Bills Mafia fever that a lot of these others do. Everybody probably sees the stereotypical footage on the internet of, alcohol being drank off of different orifices and body slams into burning tables, and so on and so forth. But I do fancy myself the football from time to time.
Nice, nice. Very nice. Now, of course, Mr. Pike is coming to you live from Niagara, New York. What's the weather looking like down there right now?
It's in the mid 70s. It was mid 80s yesterday after a torrential downpour, but thank God it did because the humidity was thick.
Oh,
and I can say, amongst many others that have traveled to Okinawa, you understand how thick that that kind of humidity can be, and it's pretty comparable here.
Definitely, definitely. Now, you just mentioned Okinawa. Now, being a military veteran myself, anytime I hear Okinawa, I think military. Ah, could you tell us a little bit about your military service that you served?
Yes. So I did, in fact, enlist into the Marine Corps in the late 90s and had the pleasure of being a 1 1-year resident of Okinawa, Japan, and it would rain morning, noon, and night. You could set your watch to when it would rain. It was honestly, that deliberate. It was just, we're raining now, we're raining now, we're raining now.
Exactly. The man is correct. Now, what kind of drew you to the Marine Corps? Was there any family influences? Was it the commercials?
No,
What was it?
no. That's a funny thing. My grandfather was for 4 years, and then he continued his career through the Department of Defense until he retired. And my uncle was in the Air Force as well, which I had no intention of ever going to the Air Force. That idea came to me when I was about 4 years old, watching G.I. Joe, and the character Leatherneck was somebody who I looked up to and was, I want to be that, Daddy, and so that's pretty much where that came from, and that I guess you could call dream, quote unquote, made its way into the actual reality.
Definitely.
And I actually joined when I was 17. My parents signed the
waiver.
They signed the waiver, and my mom didn't want to, but she knew that I was going to go no matter what. So
sounds like you're a little rambunctious as a kid. What was your early childhood? What was your early childhood like? What were you a reserved kid? Were you a little rambunctious?
I was an extrovert, just like I am now. Very outgoing. Always made friends everywhere I went. Never had a problem with that. And that's the funny thing about when I was in the Marine Corps. I was friends with a lot of non-desirables. A lot of guys that didn't have any friends, but I would always give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and I think that they appreciated that more than anything, and had some very crazy and interesting people, and I'm very grateful for those people.
Definitely.
But I was a very, very, very active kid. Played sports my whole life. Never broke a bone, surprisingly. But I never got into a bad crowd either. I was friends with everybody in school. I really didn't fit into one crowd, one genre of the stereotypical high school.
You're telling us you weren't one of the popular girls?
Well, maybe if the Mean Girls scenario was at my school, then maybe. But no, I never. All of the stereotypes that you and I grew up with, through the John Hughes films and so on, that never really played out in reality for me. It was always, there were, the preps, sure, of course, and then there were the headbangers, which that's where I fit for a while. I had long hair. I never painted my nails or anything like that. I never wore makeup, but I had long hair, wore combat boots with, a Pantera t-shirt and, sleeveless flannel.
Yeah. Breaking the law, brother, breaking the law.
Yeah. So, that stuff I definitely was. But then, as girls came into play, the girls that I fancied didn't dress that way. So I kind of, moved on from that, although I still enjoyed their music, the same kind of music. But I enjoyed all different kinds of music. The first CD I ever ordered off of BMG Music, if you remember that at all. Columbia House BMG catalogs was, Daz Effects Dead Series.
Nice. They want to fix. Daz Effects. They want to fix.
Bum, skiddity, bum, skiddity, bum. That was my jam back then. But I liked all different kinds of music. I think that attributes to my parents. I grew up listening to records. They had the wasn't on. You'd pull it down like a safe, and the speakers were in the wall. And I remember seeing this weird guy with a flashy glove and a tiger next to him,
Right?
which is Thriller, but then of course all the other stuff in between, Led Zeppelin, and then Prince and and the Beatles and the Doors, and so I grew up with many different music, and then I have a sister who was a part of the New Kid on the Block era, and so I had that
As a
my
backtrack of your life.
foreground,
Definitely.
where it was Debbie Gibson, Tiffany, and Paula Abdul, and Madonna, and all of that, 80s, mall, mall background music that you heard,
Definitely. No, where did you get all of this? It sounds like a lot of diversity. It sounds like a really eclectic taste in music and of course friends and life and dressing and different styles. Was it always that way, or did something help to prod along that diversity, or is that just part of your life?
That was just part of my life. It's funny enough, I started enjoying music and singing and stuff like that at a very early age, and I picked up the drums and guitar and bass all at the same time when I was 13, and I played all those instruments, from that point on. And at certain moments of my life, I would focus on just on one.
Definitely.
I guess out of necessity or just because that's what was driving my musical spirit at that point. Where I would play drums for numerous bands, and the guy that I got my drum set from, my first and only drum set, gave me the advice of join as many different styles of bands as a drummer as you can, so that you can be a well-rounded drummer. And that's what I did.
Absolutely.
That's what I did. And my sister was a really good flautist and a very good singer, and my brother played saxophone and clarinet, and I found out when I got my first drum set that my dad actually was a drummer, unbeknownst to me. And my mom was just a quote unquote music appreciator.
Nice.
So.
Well, I would probably fall into the category of a music appreciator. Of course, I try to sing every now and then, but definitely can't play any actual instruments. So, do you play any other instruments other than the drums, or because I know you mentioned you're a instrumental?
Yeah. So I am a singer, and I do play guitar, bass, drums. I play piano, out of necessity. I'm not as proficient at piano as I'd like to be, of course, but I've also picked up instruments and learned how to play them, like the trumpet, and the violin. I actually picked up when I was in Okinawa and used that on some tracks back then. And I guess whatever I felt like I needed at one point or another while recording a track, I learned how to play, and use it for that moment, and then that's something that I could always pick back up.
Is there anything that would tear you away from the drums as your close second to your first love?
The drums was definitely a strong passion for me for a while. I remember wanting to play the drums when I was listening to the Vanilla Ice tape.
Hey, Vanilla Ice baby. Yeah.
And so I caught myself playing drums to that. And that definitely was something that was really impressionable on me, was the drums all the time. So I played that distinctively through my whole, I guess you could say, musical career while in high school. And I played my first club when I was 15 and played clubs until.
What was the name of that club? Well, tell us a little. Whoa, you can't gloss over that. Wait a minute. First club,
yeah,
15 years old. It's a lot to be doing at such a young age and having so much responsibility on your shoulders. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So the funny thing is you pick up an instrument, you explore it, you find ways to make it work for you, and it seemed like, while I was playing drums, I didn't have my own drum kit for the first 2 years, and so a lot of teachers got very, very annoyed with me. They got very, very, very agitated because I'd be tapping every single day. And then when my father bought me my first and only drum kit, which is a 1978 Ludwig Pistol Light Candy Apple Red. So to give you an idea, it's a see-through drum set. It's fiberglass. It's acrylic. You can see through it. And that's because John Bonham from Led Zeppelin had an orange, what we call an amber.
Amber. It's amber, mate.
Yeah. And so the time when I got that drum kit that summer, I practiced. I made myself practice for at least 2 hours a day. And so when I was rehearsing 2 hours a day, my ability grew exponentially. And it seemed like from that summer on, I was the drummer that everybody wanted. So I was playing with different groups. And so I got a call one night when I was 15 years old. This group had a show that they had to play, I think, in a week. And so I had to learn 10 songs.
Ooh. How did you deal with that pressure? I mean, it's a lot to have on your shoulders at 15.
Come on. And that's a funny thing. And so it's not like it's like cover songs where you can, listen to these songs, or you have listened to these songs.
Yeah.
So you already have an idea. I went and rehearsed with the band, I think maybe once or twice.
Wow.
These all were original tunes, and so. And needless to say, we pulled it off. I'm not going to say that there wasn't any hiccups. I'm not going to say that it was a perfect session, but we pulled it off and we got asked to come back. So that's all that mattered to me. And at 15 years old, being asked to come back, to a venue, we're like, oh my God. So at that time, drums was my life for a very long time. I prided myself in being a drummer and tried to take it to the next level and started playing even more complex, difficult music and faster music and so on and so forth. And then once I signed those papers to the good old USMC, that's when I had to put that aside because you can't carry a drum kit around with you.
Definitely. So whenever you kind of put the music aside for your career in the military, what did you use to replace the drums? Because I know they're an important part of your life. How did you cope with not being able to jump onto your drum set to release some tension or to just release some stress or have a good time? What did you do?
So that's when I jumped to the other instruments that were able to be, immobilized.
Nice.
Mobile. So guitar and bass and piano is what I started to utilize as that release, that outlet. And whilst I was stationed in Japan, I was first stationed at Camp Schwab, which is in the middle of nowhere. And then the unit that I was in, they had a detachment down at Camp Hansen. And so I went to Camp Hansen, and then they have this little village out there called Kindo.
Well, hold on a sec, Matt. Set the scene for everybody who may not have been to Okinawa before. Tell us a little bit more about why you'd be in Okinawa, and of course, as a Marine, why you would be there, and how the island's kind of set up.
So the island, you could pretty much drive around in one day. That's how small that island is. And there's two sides of the island. There's the one side of the island that the rich and famous see, and then there's the other and so the side that I got to see the whole thing in one drive. So the side that I belonged to was, of course, the military side, and the Marine Corps has, as far as I know, they have the most bases on Okinawa. I know there are several Army and several Navy bases and one
Air Force
mammoth air base.
Absolutely. And that, of
And
course, folks, that's Kadena Air Force Base over there.
yeah, yeah. And so when I was there, Camp Schwab is the second to the most north Marine Corps base. A little more north than that is JDUB, Jungle Warfare Training Center, and the base that's, I guess you could say, geographically right underneath Camp Schwab is Camp Hansen. And so, and underneath that is Camp Courtney, and then I believe underneath that is Smedley Butler, maybe. I can't. It's been 20 years. So, when I
No, that was a great description. I think you hit most of them, or all of them.
right,
Yeah.
I think so. Um, so the cool thing about Camp Hansen was they had a town right outside the base, where Camp Schwab, it was just all farmland and then like a pink diamond. So that's I'm not going to elaborate on that. So out in Kinville, which was illustriously called Sinville, was a nice little Okinawa town, and at that time there was a retired airman, 5 different American style bars, and so they all had there was only 2 that were similar, but they all had different themes. There was the Red Eye Saloon, which is a country bar. There was the Ozone, where that's what I was affiliated with, and then there was the Hideaway or the Hideout, which was underground, like some places out, if you remember, East Coast, out in I think it was San Diego, which was that that Asian
kind of go downstairs. Yeah.
Right, that Asian part. And then there was like there was a dance club. I can't remember the name of that place. So they're all different themes, but that guy owned all of them, and all of his buddies were all also retired airmen, were managed bars. And so the Ozone was right outside of Camp Hansen, and I went in there and noticed that they had like a drum kit up on stage, and to make a long story short, I ended up in a band that played every weekend. So I was the singer for this group. At first I was a drummer, but then the singer dropped out, and this other Marine, he asked about the drums, and I said, yeah, we need a drummer, and then I ended up singing. So we were the house band. We played Friday and Saturday nights, and then there was this big summer metal fest, and we played at the Hideout or whatever it was called. I can't remember. And there was numerous bands, and there was this Pantera cover group. They were all Japanese, didn't speak a lick of English, but the songs were on point.
I bet. I bet.
Yeah, and so the singer jumped in the mosh pit. It was a 3-day event. Had his leg broke in the mosh pit.
Whoa!
And then the next day was on stage with a full leg cast up there, hobbling around.
Exactly. It's dedication.
Yeah, dedication.
If the Japanese are known for anything, it is definitely dedication. And of course, I will attest to that because, of course, my wife is Japanese, and I have to say that or she'll hurt me.
Let me say on the record.
Exactly. Yes, honey. That's exactly it. So it sounds like you had some really great times over in Japan. It sounds like you really integrated into the community. What other places have you been, and have you found the other places that you've been throughout your military career, your personal career, as welcoming as you found Okinawa?
That's funny. I really didn't find Okinawa very welcoming. Just my immediate surroundings.
Yeah.
I could definitely tell the tension between their community and the military community for all of our discretions that we caused over the years. Namely 2 huge bombs and the continuous rapings of their young children.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that because there's not a lot of people who know that there's been a bit of controversy. Now, if you live in on Okinawa or any of the outer lying islands that are there, uh, there is a very large amount of Americans on the island per capita. If you were to compare that with how many people who come into Japan proper through their immigration system. And of course, the reason why that is, of course, is that there are a vast amount, as Matt mentioned earlier, amount of military bases on Okinawa, Japan. Now, over the years, there have been some high profile incidents of rape, some in-town incidents of ongoing violence at bars, and some just things that put the military in a pretty bad light. Uh, some bad apples,
Yeah,
but of course, the persistence of how often these things happen and the uptick in the summertime seasons and as rotations go back. Now, of course, Marines, we have something called, yeah, of course, the third Mardiv, which is the
yeah,
uh,
third regular
division.
division. Yeah,
Yep. That Okinawa it kind of falls under. They're a forward
yeah,
deploying organization or unit. So of course there's always
yeah.
rotations in and off the island, and as those rotations go in and off of the island, the local population notices different changes and shifts in what happens in the local community. So it's very, very disruptive to the
Sure.
communities. And then, of course, you add the incidents in there, and of course, the presence of American troops in a sovereign nation. Of course, we're there. Of course, via contract and via bargain. So it's not like that we're uninvited, but we are in some aspects uninvited. So those things can cause quite a bit of stir amongst the public and the populace, both the folks that are stationed there and the people who live there, and of course the expats, some of which have businesses that they're trying to run and need to have a wonderful reputation to continue to be able to live there and thrive. So it can be a bit of a sticky situation.
I agree. On all the points that you made, I agree. It seems also that more of the senior population has the begrudging like fix, where it seems like the younger generation um, is in a way striving to be more westernized
Definitely.
because of its popularity. And I believe that also, no matter what you do, when you're mashing cultures such as ours and theirs are so extreme that statistically you're going to have are when they are at sea for an undetermined amount of time and finally, pulling to port,
Yeah,
that the outcome is unexpected.
definitely.
Tensions are high. And
I
they
mean,
always
it's so
they
much
always
so
said
that
when you go over,
there's a pattern, so much so that there's
right?
literally people know the pattern that's going to happen because it's happened so much and it's something that's been
Yeah,
pretty much interrupted for years and years and years.
right. I feel like some that finally make their way there come, completely unhinged,
Yeah.
because there's such a culture shock there. You can't read one side, and some people can feel trapped or
Yeah,
cornered,
that's true.
depending on their mental state or whether or not their judgment is clouded by one thing or another. Um, so I believe that on top of that, and they always said that there's three different, at least Marines. When you go there, you're either an alcoholic,
Hmm.
or you get hacked into the gym, or you become extremely religious.
Hmm.
So I think that I kind of melded into, I did drink a lot, but I also did a lot of music over there, and I believe that was the unearthing of me as an actual songwriter, because I was going through so many different levels of emotion that it definitely was a springboard for my music writing.
So you can kind of say that the kind of external isolation kind of made you turn inwardly.
Absolutely, absolutely. I turn into my inner self, and kind of found out who I was as a songwriter. Bouts of depression, enraging thoughts, and so on and so forth. Where it definitely gave me some subject matter to write
Definitely.
about.
I'm glad you brought that up because, sometimes we're always telling people, especially in the social work field, to look inward. And sometimes when we do look inward, it trudges up some things that aren't too pretty or things that it's not as easy to handle. We might not like ourselves as much as we want. And when you're looking inwardly, the only person that you can see, of course, is yourself. And sometimes it kind of makes us take on some things from out the outside that isn't a representative of who we really are because we're
Sure,
putting all of those things
sure.
from the world on us. When you started to look more internally, how did you feel at that time? Did you like what you saw?
Luckily, I had a very wonderful mother. Uh, she was a very strong woman. She's a school teacher. Um, so I believe, because my father left when I was young, he was still in the picture, but he wasn't the director of my upbringing per se. My mother was, and I'm grateful for that. And so I think that she did a good job at making me a good person, giving me good morals and values in my life, and also, being strict, but also, as I said earlier, when I was growing up, I didn't get into drugs or drinking really, here and there drinking wise, but not drugs. And I had a certain solid group of a few friends who also are all musicians, and that's all we did. We didn't go out and get messed up at parties and this and that. We hung out in each other's basements jamming. That's all we did was play music. And one form of music or another, or as we did as kids, just sat around and listened to tapes, records, CDs, whatever you want to call them. We sat around and listened to music and absorbed it and discussed it and appreciated it, and especially back in the day where we had this big record store where I lived called Media Play, which is now no longer.
Matt, where'd
It
you
was
grow up?
part of Suncoast. You remember Suncoast? Used to be out in San Diego.
Ah, I do remember
Suncoast.
Suncoast. Hey,
Yeah,
Matt, I'm not sure if you've told our audience where you grew up. Where did you grow up?
Niagara Falls, New York.
So you grew up in Niagara Falls, New York, too.
Yeah, yeah,
Outstanding, outstanding.
yeah.
Please continue.
So if you remember Suncoast, that was a subsidiary of Media Play, or vice versa.
Mm.
And I actually had a date at Media Play.
Wow, wow, yes, yes.
And so the anticipation of thumbing through all these CDs to find this gem, this jewel that you're hoping to find, and when you do, and you're like, yes, I've been seeing this in all the music magazines, and you can't find it anywhere. You go home with your buddies and pop it in the disc player and sit there and just marvel at it.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
just marveling at the music, but the fact that you found it.
Yeah.
You feel
I
like
think
you're.
people forget for a little bit that when we talk about downloading things, there was a certain marvel and wonder that was around just going to the CD store or to the record store and doing that search that you're talking about. That
Yeah,
was part of the
yeah.
routine. It's not
I
just getting the music, it was the search for the
yeah.
music and then getting it. And once you had it, it was like,
You know,
I'm the only
I
person
felt
who
like
has this.
I felt like I had to have a bag of sand to replace it when I picked it up. Yeah, and now you can just pull the stuff out of the air and say, oh, I want to
Exactly.
hear this and I want to hear that for a lowly cost of $9.99 a month.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Where all that anticipation and I guess you could say ownership, because you owned it. That was your CD. You brought it to
Yeah.
parties. People would be like, "Oh, I can't believe you got that!"
Yes.
Like you were part of some sort of elite society because you had an input.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. And without all of the social media telling you what to listen to, when we were growing up, if you found
We had,
something that was cool and you put somebody else onto it, you became the music guru. People would come to you and be
yeah,
like, "Hey, what are you listening to right now?" That
yeah,
was that was part of that conversation and that word of mouth and that beauty behind finding new music whenever we were
yeah,
growing up was the
yeah,
hunt for that music, the find
yeah.
of the music, and then hiding all the CDs from everybody else so that you could be the only person with it,
Oh,
you
we used
know?
to do that too. Me and my buddies, I'd hide stuff behind Michael Bolton. You
Oh,
know what I mean?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I remember a couple of friends of mine. Yes, I was in wind ensemble in high school and marching band, and jazz band. I played the kit. But I do remember that a couple of my buddies left school in the middle of school because this album was dropping. The CD was dropping at Media Play,
Oh yeah.
and they couldn't hold themselves any longer. They had to leave school and go get it, and they did. And the cool thing is when we had study halls, we could go into the band room.
Oh yeah.
And so, because the teacher was cool like that, or
Nice.
yeah, so we could go into the band room, and so all of us that were different grades and stuff like that, we all would meet and then listen to these, new CDs that somebody left school for, and all sit there and have, I guess, what you call now listening parties, but it wasn't all
Yeah,
music.
absolutely.
Um, and so all of that stuff is old gen now. Now the new gen stuff is basically, I guess you could say, zombiphily, if that's going to be a word. Go through YouTube to find artists that are unknown, that are that speak to you, not just in the stereotypical pop culture sense, where it seems like they all spread the same message, and I'm not one to judge. That's just from what I've seen myself. But there are some, great, pop artists out there who still, don't play by the rule book. I think that Lady Gaga is one of them.
Well,
Um,
you being a man of the music industry and being an artist yourself, it sounds like there's been a lot of different changes that have happened with the music industry from when you
yeah,
began to where it is right now. Tell us
yeah,
a little bit about those changes that have happened, and then tell us how those changes may have impacted you or the way you see
right,
music right now.
right. Because just from one man's point of view, one man's opinion, um, from my point of view, from what I've seen, is that the change is very strange to me, where there was talent in the individual voice, the uniqueness of that individual voice, and now it seems like all that the pop culture and executives are looking for is the same voice. Hence, The Voice, American Idol, America's Got Talent. Um, all of these are all very talented, young men and women, and not all of them are young, but they're all extremely talented. But it seems like if you put them next to one another, they all emulate a certain sound that right now America and the world is all that's listening to, is that sound. And I'm not going to say that is in its entirety, but I would say the majority. Where
Well, what do you say to people who say that the reason that they're emulating that sound is because it's popular music, and popular music has always dominated the charts, and they're just following the trend of what has been done in the past. What do you say to those folks?
I would say that at least when we had pop music, Madonna didn't sound like Paula Abdul, Michael Jackson didn't sound like Prince. You know, um, Tiffany and Debbie Gibson did not sound like one another, but they all had something to offer. Not saying that these people were extraordinarily talented or that they are, I'm not saying they are or they aren't, but they all had a unique gift where, just like New Kids on the Block, they didn't sound like anything at that time. Then all of a sudden now there's all these boy bands. Like, you had New Kids on the Block, they didn't sound like Boyz II Men. You know what I'm saying? Boyz II Men didn't sound like High Five. There's all these boy bands or if you want to call them R&B groups, but Boyz II Men was a boy band.
Yeah, very true, very true, very true. Now, what do you say to people who say that, of course, all music has some draw from some other source, and of course, there's going to be some influence and some overlap. Now, of course, the young folks right now will say, rightly so, like whenever you and I were younger, you and I were probably saying to our parents or other folks, hey, they just don't understand our music right now. I'm telling you, this is hot, this is great. Well, what do we say to the younger folks that are digging the sound that I must agree kind of sounds the same on every channel? What do you think? What do we say to them?
I mean, I just was watching a video the other day of Snoop Dogg discussing all of the mumble rappers and how they all kind of blend together. Right, maybe Future started it or whatever, but it set precedent.
Well, I'm gonna have to. My brother corrected me the other day. I said Future started mumble rap, but Black Thought from the Roots says that he was the originator. And my brother sent me an article and everything. So if I don't give a shout out to Aaron Washington and Black Thought of the Roots, of course I love the Roots. I will be remiss.
Sure, but then you have Yngwie Malmsteen that proclaims he's the fastest guitarist in the world.
Touche, my friend, touche.
Right, does not make it so.
Right.
Just because doesn't mean it's the gospel. But I'm not taking anything away from Black Thought. All I know is that set a precedent in hip hop culture where even if you were a popular person, like if you can recall when the auto-tune thing came out, then all of a sudden, Drake comes out with this album, and then Kanye comes out with this album, and everybody is jumping on that bandwagon per se. But that's what's selling, and I get it. Everybody's got to make money. I understand. But also, it has to have some substance to it. You still have to preach that poetry that you started with.
Definitely.
And I remember when Kanye first came out of the gate, he was so good. But that's a whole other topic.
Absolutely.
But to answer your question, I would say what my mother used to tell me when all I listened to was death metal. It all sounded the same. Sure, it all sounded the same, but it all sounded unique to me, and I always liked different things here and there. So I could say, sure, that maybe my judgment is a little dated because maybe of my age, but I also still listen to everything. New stuff, old stuff. I'm not just listening to my same music that I listened to from the 90s.
Absolutely.
I'm still listening to things that are relevant to this day, and they all have the same frequency. These new artists have the same frequency that I hear. Definitely. And there's only a few that are different players in the group. As I mentioned before, Lady Gaga, to me, is fantastic. She's one of the different ones, where she isn't just one of the herd, that is coming through.
Definitely.
The gates, but there's so many others out there.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you like the iconoclasts and the people who are innovators. Who are the innovators that you think? Because people kind of downplay the influence that music has in their own life, or as the background or the backdrop to their life. What's the song that's playing in the background of your life most of the time?
That is probably one of the the hardest questions I would ever have to answer.
Oh, I mean, you're on the spot now, brother. Take a moment. Take a moment. Think about that song. What's that? So when you're in a dangerous situation, because sometimes when I'm in a dangerous situation, I start to hear like, and you mentioned Michael Jackson, but I start to hear Thriller a little bit. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Sure,
And then
sure.
sometimes when I'm getting pumped up, just like everybody else out there, I hear the Rocky theme. You know what I mean? I will literally start humming that in my head. So what are some of the overlying
So
major
I
soundtracks to your
have
life?
there's always certain songs that constantly play in my head since I can remember. So you'll have like Pebbles, Mercedes Boy, or a couple of her hits.
Whoa,
Are
whoa, whoa,
always
whoa, whoa, wait, whoa, wait a minute, wait a minute. Set the scene for us. So this
well.
is long form. We've got some time, my friend. Set the scene, and then
Okay,
let
so
the music just come on, flow into the backdrop.
it doesn't matter what kind of day it is. Every once in a while, in the back of my head, I'll hear a Pebbles tune, whether it's oh God, what's the other song she does?
Okay, whoa. Let me
Yeah,
let me
it's
let
hard.
me
It's hard
let
to
me
say.
set this up for you. So here's the scenario. Here is the scenario.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
I just left the gym. I'm walking back to my car. As I drop my keys, I pick up my keys, and I notice from in the corner of my eye that I have caught the attention of someone. That someone is taking a long gaze at the striking figure in front of her, and all of a sudden in the background, all I hear is from the window to the wall. Okay, now
Sure.
that
Okay.
was a scenario
Sure.
of a song playing as a backdrop of my life. Give us a bit of a scenario with the background of your life, a little background song there.
So my mind doesn't work like that. That's not how it works for me. Nothing. There's no trigger. There's no provoking what plays in my head. So
Ah,
if I'm sitting there at my desk at work doing reports, I'm always tapping the same drum line from a death metal band called Suffocation, and the title track of their record, Pierce from Within.
let
So
us hear it, brother. Let us hear it. Let us hear
so
it.
so it's the drum part is, you know what I mean? It's just real
No,
crazy
no, no, no,
stuff.
no, 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 no. Do
But
it. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Let
but there's
our audience hear those wonderful drums. Do it again, brother. Come on. Let us
nothing
hear it.
going on. So if you want to hear what my finger does,
Yep.
it goes like that's what I
Nice. Very
and
nice.
nothing provokes that. It's just what's in my head, or if I'm walking, anywhere, it's just, Aaron Neville will play in my head for whatever reason, or Cyndi Lauper, or it all depends,
So you've
or
got a random mixtape in your head at
all
all
day,
times.
every day, all day, every day. You hear Michael Jackson, like, I wanna rock with you all
All
night,
night.
right? All this stuff. It's just a constant, or uh, what's that song? Get out my life, why don't you, babe? Ooh, ooh. Like all this stuff is just constantly in my head, or
I've got Africa by Toto. Always,
no, no,
literally, I
not too
love that
much.
song. It's stuck right here. Every time, like
But see, now
literally, every time I look out my
pop
window.
culture. That's pop culture playing with you. Where I have, she kicks her shoes off onto the floor and says, "Drive fast, speed turns beyond." She puts her hand on my knee. I put my foot on the gas. The car goes so fast, the roof was open. The music was high, and this girl's hand was going slowly up
Up
my
my
thigh.
thigh.
She had opened 3 buttons on her shirt so far. I guess that's why I didn't notice that police car. You know what I mean? Like all this stuff is in my head.
It's an earworm. It's an earworm. Get
Yeah,
stuck, man.
yeah.
You gotta get them out of there.
Like Star Trek, it hit my brain.
Right?
But this stuff is playing in my head all day. Like you said, I have this giant mixtape in my head. It's not something that's provoked, unless somebody says a certain thing that's a play on words that relates to a song.
Yeah,
and then I
definitely.
tease them with that song.
Right?
And like I did earlier when you're talking about Hold On, and I started singing Wilson Phillips. Like that's how that would be my trigger. That would be the the provoking of. But that's only if the scenario is triggered by trigger words. So other than that, like what's playing in my head is either the mixtape of my life or music that I'm gonna write.
Nice, very nice.
So,
Now you've told us a little bit about music and as an influence, and we're getting a picture of how important music is to you in your life, and how it's kind of permeated everything in your life. What other influences do you have outside of music?
So you mean figures that influence me in music?
Figures that have influenced you outside of music. Are there people in your life who have helped to influence you?
Sure.
Things, events? Because I know sometimes it's not just people; it's things that have happened to us or things that we've participated in. What are the things that you're proud of?
I would say my daughter, which is very cliche because she's only 2. But she's extremely smart. But I'm very proud of her. I would say one of my biggest influences is my girlfriend. She is a very strong, passionate woman, where we play off one another. The yin and the yang comes to mind. And I feel like, and I really try not to tinker with the idea of fate, but I do believe that you are presented with doors in your life, and the ones that you walk through, it's not the ones that you walk through, but it's how you react after you walk through those doors. And so I believe that how I've reacted in certain scenarios have obviously dictated to where I am today. And the fact that I'm with her and met her is attributed to my reactions to these doors, these metaphorical doors that I walk through. And my mother, of course, as I mentioned her before, where she was so strong and she was the rock in our family. And since she was a single mother of 3, raising us on a substitute teacher's pay, and we had 2 dogs, and it was an Aerostar, a Ford Aerostar. So she made sure that every little moment in our lives, every little holiday was important. St. Patty's Day, it's important. Every little thing was important. Halloween, every holiday was important because we were a family. We had to act like it, even if we liked it or not.
Definitely.
And so I would say, her and my best friend Jeff Barone, who's an extremely talented musician, and I attribute his musicianship to mine.
How did you meet Jeff?
I met Jeff through a childhood friend of mine when I was 10, and I was the best man in his wedding, and he sure as heck is going to be my best man.
Wow.
I perform on the last 2 releases he's had. I do a lot of the singing. I played guitar on a couple, and he was such a good musician at an early age. And at that time, when I was in my adolescent years, my teenager years, I was a very competitive sportsman. I was very into sports, was very athletic, and I still am athletic, but so I would believe, or I would like to believe, or I really do believe, that my competitiveness of being an athlete permeated into me being a better musician because I was competing with him, and he was so good at such a young age, which motivated me to be better. And so I attribute my talent to his. And so he was definitely a huge influence on me. I know you said outside of music, but I do believe that that falls into that category. And I would have to say Joseph Bowman was a big influence on me. He taught me a lot while I was in the Marine Corps.
No, I want to pause you there for a second. Now, for the folks out there who are watching, whether you're watching this live or you're watching the rebroadcast of this, Joseph Bowman is a person that I've talked about on the Drive before. I've talked about him on Agree to Disagree, Coast to Coast, and of course, he jumped in as a co-host of Agree to Disagree, Coast to Coast, the other portion, which is, of course, a bit of a social experiment that where we do a live uh, talk about a few different videos that have happened in the past week, and we do a little bit of a debate where we switch sides. He and I did a live version of one, but unfortunately, the sound on it was not uh, up to snuff and didn't get to capture all of his wisdom and wise words and information and stories and just amazingness of which I've never found in another person. Of course,
Yeah,
everybody knows what I'm talking about. Joseph Bowman, a wonderful person who has had an amazing influence on my life.
yeah,
And of course, I'm sure you are going to say that he influenced you in your young Marine Corps life as well. He did in mine. Uh,
yeah,
just an all around great guy. I can't say enough about Mr. Bowman.
yeah.
And of course, I'm hoping to get an interview with Mr. Bowman so he can
I
share
hope
some
so.
of those
I
words
hope so.
with everyone
He
too.
would definitely benefit your show. Um, he, a 5'7" beast from Arkansas. You know, you tell you, once I put them 4 wagon wheels up there, all their boots were shaking.
I'm telling you, folks, if you've never met Joseph Bowman, he has got a saying or a phrase
Yeah,
or something for every situation you
yeah,
get in, both funny and surprisingly scary at the same time,
yeah.
very intimidating for his small stature. Uh, just a man of every occasion. I can't say enough about this guy. You know what I'm
The
saying?
man who
Just the
introduced me
man's
to
man.
3-6 Mafia, uh, and I still
Just,
have that mix CD to this day.
I'm telling you, man.
Yeah, he definitely was a big influence on me as a young Marine. He definitely steered me the right way, and he definitely was disappointed when I EAS'd because my pros and cons were 4849,
Nice.
and I was a sergeant at the time. Um, I would have to say also Gunnery Sergeant Mobley was definitely a big influence on me.
Tell us a little bit about Gunnery Sergeant Mobley.
He was my gunnery sergeant for a short period of time, but he was an older Marine. Even as a gunny, you think a gunny would be kind of old, but now if you look at it now, gunnery sergeants are in their early 40s. But he definitely was older than that, and he had this wise fatherly way about him, and always referred to himself as an ugly bulldog. So he definitely was a humbled man.
Definitely.
But he definitely taught me how to be, a better man, just like Joseph Bowman did. And I would have to say Ileana Valero, if you remember her at all.
I do.
She, once I requested mass because I didn't agree with what was happening to me, and I had to stand in position of attention for a full hour in front of my captain, and she had my back and said, I don't believe that Corporal Pike should have had to do what he was asked. And sure, you're supposed to get your marching orders and march on, but not everything is rightfully so. Um, Yeah, so she was definitely a big influence on me. Um, Sergeant Peter Dykstra, I don't know if you remember him or not.
I don't. Tell us a little bit more about Sergeant Dykstra.
He was my sergeant when I first came to San Diego, and again, he was like 10 years older than I. Well, he still is. He's
And
still
when
with
you say
us.
San Diego, of course, for all the folks out there, there's a few terms. Let me just recap a few of the terms that have been used today. Uh, PCS, that's processing orders. That is whenever you are leaving either a place or the service. Of course, EAS, of course, that's when you are leaving the service. That's the end of your active service. We said gunnery sergeant, folks. That is someone who is at one of the highest mastery levels. Of course, there's a master sergeant. That is a one of those things of either gunnery sergeant, technical expert, master sergeant. One of those folks who is a master at a specific area. So.
Right?
Of course, those are different military ranks that are associated with the Marine Corps and the Army, and of course the Navy and the Air Force as well. But we all have different rank structures. So you can always learn more by going to visit your local recruiter. Shout out to the military and military service. And of course, we always will be here to talk about some of those questions you may have about military
Yeah, absolutely.
service
Yeah.
or public service or community service, any of those realms. Of course, you can send me a message personally. Also, I will direct you to Matt's page if you ever want to have any ask Matt any questions about anything you're hearing here today while I am interviewing Matt. Go to his page, ask him some questions. He's a great guy. Learn a little bit more about him. Follow him on the social media pages out there. And if you ask nicely, he might even sing for you. Now, Matt, you were
Sure.
Matt, you were telling us a little bit more about Sergeant Dykstra. Tell us a little bit more.
So I would say that, again, he was somebody who was that patriarchal figure for me, being a young Marine. And him and I actually got really close. He's still one of my best friends. I still talk to him. There's a few Marines, including yourself, that I talk to on a regular basis. Joseph Bowman being one of them, who I talk to regularly. Uh, Sergeant, Ileana, I talk to her regularly, and Peter Dykstra. And the funny thing is when I was growing up, I was listening to music that was for the time, for a generation that was about 7 to 10 years older than me. So when Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains were out, I was 9, 10 years old, and I had these dubbed Maxell tapes, from my best friend's cousin who was about that age, about 7 to 10 years older than us, and so we really, latched on to that music. And so a lot of the older guys when I was in the Marine Corps, recognized that I was in the know of these, bands. And so we had that common ground, that connection. And he was one of them. And then he ended up being my roommate when he was what they called what did they call him? A geographical bachelor. So since he was married, but his wife was not in the same state, he was not eligible to live in a barracks room. He had to live in a modified squad bay. And since he was my best friend at the time, and that modified squad bay was all the way on the other side of the base, I illegitimately allowed him to be not allowed it, but a mutual agreement for him to be my roommate until he EAS'd, because he was my best friend.
Absolutely. Hey, friendship trumps the rules sometimes, folks.
Right.
In every major organization out there, in every business, in every company, in every corporation, in every organization you can think of, someone knows someone else that they either know through a mutual friend or friendship or some kind of tie. And
I
that
think
person,
they call it nepotism, or
yeah, it's a little bit of nepotism. Sometimes it has a little racism in there. Sometimes a little sexism. It's usually one of those isms, but those isms are happening everywhere. everywhere. Sometimes for positive reasons, and sometimes for some pretty nefarious reasons. But
Yeah,
I
I would
digress.
agree. But that was definitely a positive,
Definitely.
and that enriched our relationship even further.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I still, talk to that man this day. We had that common ground, which is, you know, honestly very important in a
Definitely.
friendship and
Definitely.
a relationship. Yeah, sure, everybody's going to have their own opinion and this and that, but you have your bonds. So,
Definitely.
and it wasn't just that you were eating the same, you know, crap together.
Yeah.
Whilst in the Marine Corps, but we enjoyed each other's company and just laughed constantly.
Definitely.
We still, to this day, when I call him, I still quote certain movies as an opening to our conversation. No matter what it is, I still rant off these, and rattle off these movie quotes because in the Marine Corps, there's a lot of hurry up and wait.
Yeah, there's a lot of movie watching in the Marine Corps.
Than to watch a movie or two.
Definitely. A lot of movie watching, a lot of spending time in a day room or the dining facility or the dining hall or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of what everybody calls hurry up and wait. Now, of course, there's some action-filled times too, and of course, there's some sad times too. But it always reminds us that one of the things that military service really brings out in people is a sense of community because, of course, you're in some extreme situations with some extreme friends that may not be your friends at the beginning, but they're going to be your friends after those situations, or people that you can trust because you trust either the training or their diligence or their professionalism. And of course, it brings up kind of an observation that I was making whenever we first started talking. Now, I've asked you a little bit about influences, and you've given me a lot of influences. And one thing that I noticed with the influences is some of the people that have influenced you were these strong male characters in your life.
Sure.
One of the observations that I've made, of course, is it seems like there maybe you either didn't grow up with your dad or there was a little tumult with your father growing up. And of course, I didn't grow up with my father either. And so whenever I see that in other folks, I start to notice some of the things that I do in my own life. And that's usually for that missing father figure that I had or that person to add the male stability. Of course, my mother did wonderfully in both roles, you know, but always looking to find those other people who can either be mentors or people who can contribute to my life. And a lot of the things that you have expressed are the same things that I've looked for in mentors, and those same great qualities that you found in Sergeant Dykstra and Sergeant Bowman, and those things are the same things that have helped to help me to get to higher heights in my life and in my personal life and in business and professionally, but also in my personal life. Whenever I'm feeling down or whenever I feel like I don't know where to go, I think back to situations, and I sometimes I will put those father figures that you and I both share in those situations, and I ask, well, okay, what would Bowman do in this situation? What would Sergeant Dykstra do in this situation? You know, and some of those influences I've had over my life, I'll just put them in there, I'll plug them in, and for the folks who are out here watching. I encourage you to find a mentor, find a strong male figure, find a strong female figure, find someone who can inspire you, or someone you look up to, or someone you can emulate, and put yourself into their shoes when you're having a tough time in life, or when you are finding it hard to make it through a day, or when you just need an extra oomph or you need somebody to just give you some guidance and those people aren't there around you, or you don't have somebody that you can go to at that moment, put yourself into those role model shoes and trudge forward, keep moving on with that strength that they've imparted on you, either via conversations or through personal experience or just looking at them from a distance. Take that wisdom, take that power, take that strength, and use that in that moment to help you make it through those situations. Matt, Um, uh, you've given us so much to talk about, so much to think about here today. What are some of the other things that you'd like to tell us before we wrap up here? Um, Tell us a little bit more about some parting things that people can use in their life that has helped you. Something like your personal mantra.
So if I had to describe that, what drives me on a day-to-day basis, it would always be to to be to be a better man. And what I mean by a better man is when your conscience, your inner voice is, you know, when I always remember this, unspoken law, where if you have to question it, well, then guess what? It's probably something you shouldn't do. I go by that a lot, of course, or on the flip side of that coin, if it's on your mind and you're not moving forward with it, well, then you're not doing yourself justice. You need to act on it. And that, I think, all in turn is about having integrity. And of course, that's a huge core value from the Marine Corps, is having integrity. And I do agree with that 100%. I also believe that life, as I said earlier, is not about the doors that are placed in front of you, but how you react to those doors that you walk through. And for a long time, I was ignorant, and I didn't place blame on myself, but I placed it out, even at God. And I realized that the scenarios that are placed in front of you are not God. What is God is how you react to those scenarios. And God can be anything that you feel is the right thing. So I think that, yes, maybe there are certain things that you find that are unjust, but that's just life. So how you react to them is what makes you a good person. How you want to be judged at the end. So if this certain scenario is placed in front of you and you decide to act negatively on it instead of taking a step back and examining the situation and putting your best foot forward, well, then guess what? Then you did wrong in that part. Where I believe that these scenarios that are placed in front of you, even the smallest things where, somebody dropping money, and, that's one of the most cliche scenarios, but again, that shows your character. Do you mention to this person
Internal
again that they're not
intestinal
bill?
fortitude is what we used to say in the Marine Corps, right?
What's that?
We used to say in the Marine Corps, intestinal fortitude, right?
Right, you got it. Or I used to hear a lot in the Marine Corps, good initiative, bad judgment.
Absolutely, absolutely. I heard that a little more than most.
Right. And that's why you got to take a step back so you don't just jump.
Yeah.
Think first, But I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned in life is that it's how you react to those situations. It's not anybody's fault. It's just the way life is. There's too many numbers flying invisibly in the air that land and make things the way they are statistically, and so on and so forth. Like when you try to leave the driveway of your house and two cars pass in front of you coming from either side at that time you're trying to leave your house. That's just life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's nothing that you can do about it. There's nobody to be mad at. That's just the way it goes, and accept it and move on. And it's taken me a long time to realize this, longer than I'd like to admit, but I've also realized that you can't treat anybody the way you want to and think it's okay because you are who you are. You have to treat people accordingly. Again, that cliche, treat people how you want to be treated, but people don't think about that in the aspects of you being insincere and discourteous and dishonest. And
Civility is important.
mm-hmm.
It really is.
And I really think that, you have to take into consideration of people's feelings and what you do and say, how it may affect them long term, not just in that instant. And all of that stuff is very important to me. And I think that me finally grasping onto this and applying it in my life has made my life so much better. And I attribute that to how my life is now, where, I am a single father, but I do have joint custody. I fought through court and through all the craziness that you can imagine of what my ex was, and fighting for my right as a father. And now I have joint custody, and I can see her all the time. And unfortunately, it's not the scenario that I want, but I feel blessed to have the scenario that I do. I do get to see her every day and be a part of her life, and I damn sure will make that it happens. And so, it's little things like that where it's nobody's fault per se, as far as like, yes, the scenarios were put in front of you, but I could have just took a step back and not put my best foot forward and let things turn out how I didn't want them to, and then put blame on anybody else. You have to apply yourself and put forth that effort to obtain your goals.
Definitely.
All that stuff.
I think it goes back to what you just said. It's how you react to those situations, because folks and everybody watching, everybody out there, you're no doubt going to have some bad times. You're no doubt going to have some situations that are tough to deal with. You're going to be in some scenario that you were not thinking you were going to be in, and you may not react great in that moment, but how you react in the outcome of that, how you pick yourself up if you get knocked down, or if you are a winner in that situation, how you win gracefully, how you act to the people that you are victorious over matters too.
Yeah. The best part is last year when I went to the ASCAP Expo in Hollywood, I didn't think that I had the funds to fly out there and back and pay for cost of living and pay for it was thousands, and but I made that choice and I moved forward with it, and now I get paid to write for advertising.
Outstanding.
Because I took that step forward.
Definitely.
And so now when there's commercials on that you hear some song, it might be me.
Right.
So therefore, if I wouldn't have took that step forward, I wouldn't be in this position. I wouldn't have had this person have faith in me and believe that I have a talent. Because again, that's in the eye of the beholder.
True.
That I have a talent and to put it to use, and now I have that opportunity, and am a paid musician, not just a live musician, which I've been doing that for over 20 years. You know what I mean? I've been doing that for so long, but now it's just to the point where I can sit here and write music and record it and send it out to somebody else and get paid for it. And I feel very, very blessed for that as well. So, maybe it's taken me a little longer than I think it should for me to be able to use this knowledge that has been passed on to me, but it's better late than never.
Definitely. And we've got many, 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 many years to come to share some of that wisdom with all of us. And of course, I hope that you will come back and share more of your story with us. And of course, I hope I'm going to get a chance to debate you a little bit on our sister show. Of course, that's Agree to Disagree Coast to Coast with my wonderful host that I have to give a shout out to. That's Mr. Dan Eichler, and the round of guest hosts that I've had, that of course Lamar Scott, Jonathan Percival, I've had Patrick Lewis on, and of course Mr. Mathew Pike. We would love to have you on the show as well. Folks, I truly appreciate having Mathew here. Let's give him his round of applause as we always do. People are giving you a standing ovation right now. Please take a bow. Curtsy. Bow. Folks, of course, we always appreciate you tuning in to Agree to Disagree Coast to Coast. I also appreciate you checking out our other Facebook show, which, of course, is The Drive, and you can catch that on Mondays and on Fridays. Of course, we are still working on perfecting the mechanics of Agree to Disagree Coast to Coast with guest host Dan Eichler. But if you hang in there with us and send us those messages about what you like, what you don't like, we can keep crafting the show and the interview series into exactly the product that you want. We want to make this a community, people. We need you to get involved. We need you to send me information about the interesting people that you want me to talk about and talk to and talk with, okay? And remember, folks, my other wonderful business partner, Sylvia Milligan, we are working on a radio show that we're going to try to incorporate a little bit of Agree to Disagree to Coast with, some of the business information that I used to share, some of the real estate information, because of course Sylvia is a real estate professional, and of course some of the social work and some of the great things that you've seen from our great guests that we've talked to, whether it's Matt, whether it's Mr. Bowman, whether it's Mr. Percival. All of these great people have wonderful things that they can share with you in your life, and you have wonderful things that you can share with us. So, people, get involved, talk to us. Share your thoughts with us. Share your stories with us. Let us interview you. Share what you liked about what Mr. Pike said here today. Share some of those personal stories about that have touched you in your lives that can identify with what Mr. Pike told you. Tell me what you identify with in my life so I can share some of my stories with you as well, because I want to hear your stories. Mr. Pike wants to hear your stories. Visit his page, like his music, and follow him on all the social media outlets that are out there. Now, folks, I want to thank you for being here with us. I've talked more than enough, but as I always say, and I have to say again here tonight, someone out there loves you. And if you can't find that someone, I love you. Thank you again for watching. I love you. I appreciate you. And watch again. Bye. Good night, folks.